haven't tipped one game. Scored 1 point.
The NBA is back, and through the earliest part of the season, we've already gotten to see how all the moves of the offseason and the draft are panning out. Some teams have overperformed, some have underperformed, and there are some teams that will be making big changes for sure after this season. But in this video, we'll go into which teams are leading in the power rankings for the 2020-2021 season. But first, a simple reminder on how to enter our brand new giveaway. We are giving away either an iPhone X Max, the new iPad mini, or MacBook Pro. It's all your choice. So be sure to leave a like, comment the keyword, subscribe, and turn on notifications to enter the giveaway. It's really that simple. 1. Los Angeles Lakers. It's never easy to predict which team is going to win the title based on just the early part of the season, but it's clear the Lakers are the best team in the NBA based on what we've seen so far. They might be headed for a repeat, and that will be the prediction the experts are most confident in, unless something big changes to shake things up between now and the postseason. Of course, with a lot of the season left, there's still time for that to happen. But right now, it's not looking like the Lakers are going to get knocked off their perch as the top team after they were able to bring Anthony Davis back and added Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell. Many, in fact, believe that there's no real challenger to Los Angeles and that they'll walk through the NBA Finals easily if they avoid sabotaging themselves, as some talented rosters have in the past. While the James Harden trade changes that and moves the Nets up on the list of the NBA's contenders, it's not quite enough to make them the favorites given the track record that Los Angeles has already given us since the start of the season. Not only are they on the top of their conference, but they have the most wins in the league in general, and they took home 4 wins during the span of games between January 8th and January 13th. That includes a 3-game trip on the road. Anthony Davis came back into the lineup during that span, and the Lakers became the first team this season to keep the Rockets below 1 point per possession. And notably, this was before the Rockets traded away James Harden. Harden had 20 points when the Lakers and Rockets met on January 10th, but only 2 other players managed double-digit points for Houston. The Lakers took the win by 18 points, showing off both their own dominance and the state of the Rockets this season after the Westbrook trade and leading up to the James Harden trade. The Lakers would also take the second game of their road trip in Houston by 17 points, further showing the gap between them and Houston right now. The night afterwards, they were in Oklahoma City and defeated the Thunder by an even larger margin to keep their winning streak going. Right now, there's not another team that has the same form that the Lakers do on a consistent basis, and the Lakers don't necessarily have to bring their best game to keep winning on most nights. 2. Boston Celtics. While the Lakers are on top of the West, it's their traditional rival in Boston that's on top of the Eastern Conference. And if the Brooklyn Nets don't come out ahead in the East in the playoffs thanks to the addition of James Harden and the other superstars in their lineup, we might end up seeing yet another meeting between the Lakers and the Celtics in the finals. They've come out of the earliest stretch of the season with only a few losses, similarly to the Lakers. And, like the Lakers, they recently put together a winning streak of their own and picked up 4 wins between January 3rd and January 8th, where they won close games against Detroit and Miami and had more sound wins against Toronto and Washington. The Celtics have been able to do this without their big-name player Kemba Walker, who has been out with an injury. The team only recently greenlit Walker to begin practicing again, and it remains to be seen when his actual return to the court will come. The fact that the Celtics have been able to do well in his absence shows the depth on the rest of the team, but it remains to be seen how the Celtics will shape up in the coming games with other players missing time because of health and safety protocols. Top performers Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been wrapped up in trouble on this front with those protocols recently and are both listed on the injury report because of it. Troublingly, they represent the 2 highest scorers on the Celtics team right now by a wide margin, with Marcus Smart coming in at number 3. Of course, it's still early in the season, and there might be a point later on when the Celtics are glad that their best players spent some time on rest and recovery rather than trying to win every game this early. Being the champion of the first few months of the season doesn't equal being the best team when the postseason comes around, after all. 3. Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks had their biggest accomplishment of 2020 when they convicted Giannis Antetokounmpo to re-sign instead of moving on from the team thanks to their failures to move forward in the playoffs. This season, the Bucks are in hunt to get further than the second round and prove that they aren't going to waste Giannis as a superstar talent by squandering their chances to win a ring with him at the helm. Predictably, Giannis has been a big part of the early success so far for Milwaukee. The Bucks are one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, and depending on how the next couple of weeks go, they could move up their position from 3rd and challenge the Celtics around the top spot in the East. Giannis has been their top contributor so far this season with 26 points per game and 10 rebounds per game, but one underrated factor making a big big impact for the Bucks so far this season is Chris Middleton having what looks like his best year. Middleton is the team's second leading scorer and has 21 points per game at this point in the season, as well as 6.3 rebounds per game and 5.7 assists per game. He's also notably shooting 47% from behind the three-point line with 5.7 attempts per game, something that's definitely making an impact for Milwaukee. His two-point field goal percentage is better as he's shooting 58% from this range, which puts him a couple of percentages behind Giannis in the category. Of course, the Bucks haven't faced the toughest competition on the schedule yet. Some of their recent wins include Detroit, Cleveland, Orlando, teams that aren't exactly around the top of the league right now. They also have some things to figure out on defense, considering the way they lost to the Jazz in a game where Middleton and Giannis combined for 64 points. That should have been enough to secure the win, but Utah was able to walk away with comfortable margin after scoring 131 points. The only conclusion that can be taken from a game like that is that the Bucks need to improve their defense to avoid it happening again the next time they run into more offensively minded competition. 4. Los Angeles Clippers. The Los Angeles Clippers are behind their crosstown rivals in the Western Conference, but right now, most don't expect them to compete with the Lakers if it comes down to the two meeting in the postseason. Few would be willing to bet on the Clippers if they even met the Lakers in the regular season, with both teams having healthy rosters. Still, the Clippers are doing better than some of the competition when it comes to catching up with LeBron and company. After all, they're in second place in the conference, even if it's too early for those standings to really mean much, as there's not much gap between them and the third best team so far. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are predictably the top contributors to this team, with George scoring about 25 points per game and Leonard scoring just less than that. The Clippers have also gotten a surprising amount of contribution from Nicholas Batum, whom the Hornets were finally able to offload after some very poor seasons, with the team put Batum's career in question and made it look like retirement was the main option available to him in the near future. But Batum is playing 29 minutes per game and contributing 10 points and 5 rebounds a game at age 32, a stat line that probably not everyone expected given his performance during his last year in Charlotte. A big problem for the Clippers is having one of the worst defenses in the league. They're all the way at number 26 in defensive rating, which is almost the exact opposite of their rival from across town, which is in first place right now. Their offensive rating is actually third, which puts them higher up than the Lakers, but it's hard to win a title with just offense. As the season continues, the Clippers will have to pay attention to figuring things out on defense, not just trusting in having one of the better offenses in the league and being able to get past other teams just by scoring a lot. That might work during some games in the regular season, but it's unlikely to work in the postseason. 5. Phoenix Suns. The team that's third in the Western Conference right now didn't even make the playoffs last year. That's the Phoenix Suns, who have made the move this offseason to acquire Chris Paul and will now have a limited amount of time to make the next step forward and try to make an upset appearance in the finals while Paul is still a productive player. That's easier said than done, but Phoenix's performance so far this season makes them look like a team that will be represented in the playoffs later. Devin Booker is obviously the leading scorer, but Chris Paul is doing what the Suns brought him in to do and has 8.7 assists per game. While he's not scoring as much as he has in previous seasons, the Suns have other players to handle that role. DeAndre Ayton has had a slow start, but if there's any season for him to have a breakout performance and step it up, it's this one. The former number 1 overall pick has 11 rebounds per game as the leading rebounder for the Suns, but much of what happens with them from here on out might have to do with how quickly Ayton steps up and takes advantage of this chance to be one of the team's leading players next to Devin Booker and Chris Paul.